Can we train computers to reason like doctors? And if we could, would doctors embrace them and use them to make better decisions? These are some of the questions I've been contemplating over the last few years, working at IBM, crunching data and building smart machines. While machines are getting ever smarter, people have used computing to improve diagnostics for several years. In 1971, Elcint released the VDP-1. It was the first medical imaging device with a digital image processor and display. At the time, it was quite revolutionary. For the first time, doctors could see the organs in real time as they were being scanned. The man in this picture is one of its inventors, my father, Dr. Moshe Ben Poat. My father and his team believed that technology can help change people's life by giving doctors timely access to the information they need to make decisions. Even though I was only 10 at the time, I remember being intrigued by how this machine works. Through my father and through Elcint, I grew up living and breathing technology. I developed a curiosity and a passion to put technology to work. How can we take math and science theory and turn it into applications that help change people's lives? Today, 4 decades later, computing, medicine, imaging have made amazing progress. We have capabilities my father's generation could only dream about. And in my role as Director of Cognitive Solutions in IBM Research, I get to play with one of the coolest pieces of technology out there. We call it Watson. For those of you who don't know, Watson is the supercomputer that became famous in 2011 by beating the 2 all-time world champions in the hit question and answer game show Jeopardy! To achieve this, Watson had to master answering complex, open-domain questions with accuracy, speed, and confidence. So how does Watson work? In a nutshell, it has 3 fundamental components. First, it understands natural language at scale. It could read and understand thousands of pages in a matter of seconds. Second, for each question, it generates several potential answers with confidence. And it will display the evidence associated with each such answer. And last but not least, it learns. It learns from the responses we select, as well as new information it receives. And thus it gets smarter over time. Physicians were one of the first groups that recognized the value in a system like Watson. This is clearly an area where the cognitive overload is very high. Just keeping up with the medical literature is an almost impossible task for most practicing physicians. So in the last 3 years, we've been feeding Watson a steady diet of textbooks, medical journals, best practices, medical records, and we're working with physicians to experiment with the system, but also train it, teach it how they reason. Watson today focuses on text, but practicing medicine, and in particular, treating cancer, requires also dealing with images, adding another dimension to the cognitive overload. As an example, an emergency room radiologist may see up to 200 cases, each one of them having hundreds of images, in a typical shift in a mid-sized city hospital. These images will cover a multitude of diseases, and he will most likely have very little information about the patient's clinical history at his disposal. So we in IBM research labs across the world have kicked off a new grand challenge we call Medical Sieve, to give Watson sight and prepare it to save as a radiology assistant. We envision an assistant that never gets tired, is never distracted, is current on all the medical literature, knows all the patient's clinical history, as well as all the similar cases across the world. And yes, we also help reason through all this information. To demonstrate how the system works, let's look at the case of a 42-year-old woman who has discovered a lump in her breast. A very typical case, as 1 in 2 women will discover a lump in her breast in her lifetime. Fortunately, most of these will turn out to be benign. But as anyone who has ever gone through this knows, this may take weeks of anticipation and a battery of tests to get those results. The woman contacted her family doctor, who scheduled a radiology session in the nearest center. Once her scan is complete, Medical Sieve will automatically and independently analyze her clinical data as well as the image data. Let's see this in action.
Ultrasonic breast image has arrived. Mass tumor detection. Mass tumor has been found. Proceed to mass tumor characterization.
In this case, the system indeed found a suspicious region, which it highlighted in red. Medical Sieve now applies advanced computer vision algorithms to try to characterize this suspicious region. The steps being performed by the system are shown on the left-hand side as they're being performed, while on the right-hand side, we see the same findings translated into the language of the radiologist. The system will also assign the mass a BI-RADS value between 0 and 6 using the American College of Radiologists coding system. Note that Medical Sieve can detect very small changes in the image that may not be visible to the human eye. In particular, by measuring very small changes in the ultrasignal in the signal, it can create what we call attenuation images and highlight features that would not go detected otherwise. Medical Sieve will now analyze the clinical data as well as the current symptoms, combine this with the visual data, and apply its advanced reasoning engine to try to reach some conclusions. In this case, it has two potential outcomes diagnosed. This is either a simple cyst or an inflamed cyst. It will also suggest some potential patient management options. In order to reach this level of reasoning, we're collaborating with physicians in Israel and the US to train the system, in essence teaching it the field of medical imaging diagnosis. This includes modeling the knowledge of the radiologist into machine-readable form, digesting volumes of relevant medical literature, feeding it thousands of annotated images with ground truth, and annotating clinical data and relating it to the image data. This work with the physicians has turned out to be the most critical success factor in training this system. I already mentioned the need to take our computer vision algorithms and translate them into the language of the radiologist. Similarly, we had to learn how the radiologists actually reason. Let me give you an example. In computer vision, we oftentimes design algorithms to be orientation invariant. However, it turned out that orientation relative to the skin is actually one of the important factors that physicians use to diagnose breast cancer. In addition, in order to feed the system thousands of annotated images, we're working with several hospitals across the world and creating one of the largest sets of annotated breast cancer images as well as cardiac images. In order to increase the significance of its findings, Medical Sieve will now analyze thousands of cases of anonymized breast cancer in its repository. And in this case, it's found several across the world that are almost a perfect match to those of this patient. This data is shared electronically within minutes with the radiologist, who will review these findings and either approve them or suggest changes. The radiologist can interact with the system using natural language, thus using it as if he was consulting with a specialist. Using such a system, we believe that it will be possible to significantly reduce the amount of time a woman will have to wait to get the results of her tests. We envision a future where even before the patient gets home, the system can send her an SMS with a test of her results or schedule a follow-up visit. So can we train computers to reason like doctors? I believe we can. It will take a little more time for this line of research to mature, but our results so far indicate that by combining forces between physicians, computer scientists, engineers, and human design experts, we are on the right path. And will doctors embrace them? History shows us that technology is adopted once it proves its usefulness, and we quickly forget how we ever lived without it. This was certainly true for the case of digital imaging versus film imaging. I assume many of you trusted your GPS to navigate you here tonight. Similarly, I believe that once we have enough physicians working with advisors such as Watson, a unique partnership will emerge between the humans and the computer that will leverage the unique strengths of each to solve problems that neither could solve on their own. Thank you.